With over 15,000 tools available, selecting the right MarTech can be challenging. Meet the MarTech Intelligence Report's free buyer's guides, exploring specific platforms including purchase considerations, leading players, adoption trends, and more. No matter where you are in the purchase journey, MarTech Intelligence Reports can help.
Welcome to the November edition of the MarTech Conference. I'm Mike Pastore, Head of Content and Media for Third Door Media. If you were with us in September for our discussion of AI and data, welcome back. And if you're just getting on board now, we're excited to have you join us. Before we begin, a big thank you to today's sponsors for helping make this event possible. And a reminder for you at home or in the office to take a moment and rate each panel discussion that you're going to see today and provide feedback to help us create better events in the future. And now, I have the pleasure of introducing our keynote presenter, Mr. Chief MarTech himself, Scott Brinker. Scott was here when the MarTech conference began, and we're always excited when he comes and shares all of his insights with our community. So we asked him to join us today to explain how agentic AI is going to transform the future of marketing. I'll see you at the Q&A.
Thank you, Mike. Hi, everyone. It is absolutely awesome here to be with you as we talk about, how agentic AI is changing the future of marketing. So we're going to have a packed next 26, 27 minutes or so. So let's dive right in. Short version is I've been in MarTech a long time. But I want to step back here and start by thinking about, here I am, I'm giving you a presentation with slides. How did that used to work? You go back 40, 50 years in the 60s and the 70s, it was very hard to produce slides. People had to lay out each slide on an actual physical board. They'd be using X-Acto knives and rubber cement. Who even knows what rubber cement is anymore? They would take photographs of each one of those, then get those developed, convert them into 35 millimeter slides. The process took weeks. There was no editing. If there were maybe a few thousand presentations that got given in any given year in a business, that was probably a lot. And then you fast forward to the 80s and the introduction of PowerPoint, which, fun fact, was actually originally built for the Mac before it was acquired and then, built for Windows. And now we're at a place where, oh my goodness, I think the latest stats are something like 30 million PowerPoint presentations are given every day. And you could probably make the remark that I'm not sure all of them should be given. But there's no way of denying that this democratization of the ability for people to create these presentations, to be able to share and communicate, it's just gone through the roof. And now here with AI, it's getting even crazier. I'm just going to pick one AI slide tool, Gamma. It's been getting a lot of attention, and just walking through a few examples of I'd like to create with AI. So I'll generate a deck. Was my topic the most creative things marketers can build with AI? It generates even a recommended outline for me. It's research topics. Oh, wow, that's pretty cool. What style would I like that in? Okay, I pick a style, and then, oh my goodness, I get all these amazingly designed slides. Again, starting point, I can edit from here, but hey, actually now I look at it and I realize some of these slides aren't in 16:9 format. Okay, well, I just say, hey, can you make sure they are all 16:9? Like I tell an intern, and guess what? They're all 16:9. I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to keep working in this tool. I want to download it to PowerPoint. No problem. Download it to PowerPoint. We're off to the races. Those screens I just walked you through, those are literally I didn't edit anything out. Those are the exact screens that I went through for about 2 or 3 minutes. And here I am with a presentation that's crazy, amazing, beautiful. This to me is such a metaphor of what we're seeing across all of MarTech with AI. Things that used to take weeks have now gotten compressed down to being able to be created in minutes. And it's not just about the speed or even the volume. I would actually argue the creative range that we are seeing, the way this is expanding, what people can do I mean, those designs, I mean, you'll see with these slides that are largely the ones I have designed, not nearly as good as like, what a like AI designer could actually make happen. Memo to self, next presentation, use Gamma. The broader setup for this to me is that across the board, we're moving from a world of scarcity, certainly with, technology and what we can create, to abundance. And this is exciting and also very challenging. When we talk about abundance, let's face it, a great example of abundance would be the crazy MarTech landscape, right? Which has just gone, over the year, a few hundred solutions to back here May of this year, nearly over 15,000. Crazy. I know it's not readable there. We'll sort of zoom in. Hopefully that's a little better. Yeah, not really much better. Okay, I understand. I think Gavin Dunaway, sort of summarized it best now. When we do publish this thing every year, people are like, oh, please stop. Crazy. But there's no way of arguing. This is an absolute abundance of technologies and tools and capabilities that are available to you as a marketer. And a whole heck bunch more ones, have been coming here fast and furious over the past couple years with AI. I always like to think of this because that crazy MarTech landscape doesn't really do a good job of representing reality because all those little micro dots are equally unreadable. If we really look at the way the industry is structured, it would look like a long tail. There's like a few dozen major platforms, have huge adoption, billion-dollar companies. You've got maybe hundreds of leading horizontal solutions. And then there's incredible long tail, of folks that aspire to become the next major platforms, but also specialized tools in regions or verticals or around particular ecosystems, services companies building software. We've just witnessed this incredible growth of these long tail MarTech tools. And it was sort of leveling out up until about, 2023, when, of course, the world went Gen AI crazy. And this kicked off an incredible new growth spurt in the MarTech landscape. From 23 to 24, we saw massive growth in commerce and sales and content experience MarTech categories. This past year, from 2024 to 2025, it did sort of pull back a bit. We started to see the growth get a little bit distributed more evenly across different categories, but still that whole massive MarTech landscape still grew by about 10% overall. So we're going to talk through what some of these technologies are. Again, given now only 24 minutes or so, we'll do our best to cover as much as we can. But I think the thing that we're all excited about here is what everyone's talking about these past few months of agents and agentic. I just want to acknowledge, while there's a lot of exciting things to talk about here, it's still very early. It's kind of amazing that we're at a place where we've already seen so much adoption with these AI assistants. I think they have crossed the chasm. That's 800 million users of ChatGPT. But when we start looking at things like AI agentic workflows or true AI agents, they're still relatively early in the adoption phase. And one of the things I just want to start out by saying here is we do not have to get everything in marketing and MarTech to be agentified. If you start, I kind of think of agentic capabilities in a MarTech stack along a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum here, there's purely the rules-based traditional marketing automation capabilities we've had for years. These are incredibly valuable because, they are predictable, they are explainable, they work in the same repeatable way every time you run them. And they're also static. They don't necessarily have as much flexibility, but they're very reliable. Then as you start to look across the other end of the spectrum, way off on the other side, there's this vision of, we'll have AI agents that control other agents and networks of agents, and they'll be figuring out the plans, and we'll just say, go get me customers, and I'll figure it out. We're not to that science fiction place, but even as we look at smaller versions of that, it's still worth recognizing that these AI agents, they have a different set of trade-offs. They work on a probabilistic way. They have a lot of variance. That autonomy comes with some risk that they're going to do things in a different way than you might have actually wanted them done. And so when you look across the spectrum, from like traditional rules-based automation to like purely agent-driven capabilities, there's actually pros and cons on both sides of that. This isn't a maturity model. You don't have to get from the left to the right away. And in between the two, we have all sorts of great opportunities to incorporate AI actions within otherwise more structured workflows, or even like start to use AI to make decisions for us within those more structured workflows. You don't have to eat the entire elephant in one bite. Now, that being said, agents are just the center of so much conversation. And one of the things I want to do in our, next 15 minutes here is make it clear that agents aren't just like one big category of like, oh yeah, it's just all marketing agents. There are different kinds of agents that we're having to work with in marketing. There are AI agents that actually work directly for us as the marketer that we control. They help with like the production and analysis of marketing. We also have a set of agents that we're exposing to customers. We still control them, but they're under our control. And then we have, perhaps most interesting and most disruptive, is starting to see AI agents that are under the control of the customer. So let's look at some of these examples. Like, agents for marketers. Well, I suspect you probably have some of these in your tech stack today, partly because, many of the existing marketing platforms have all AI-ified themselves, and built in agents, Salesforce and HubSpot and Adobe and all those folks. You might be using some of these like workflow automation tools, like Zapier or Workato that have now increasingly added agentic capabilities. But these are all things where we're basically using agents to help accelerate the work we're doing backstage as marketers. We then have a set of these agents that are customer facing. Probably the most popular have become these customer service agents, whether it's things like Fin or Sierra, that basically like help self-service resolutions for customers. Work 100% of the time, but if 60, 70, 80% of the time they can help a customer more quickly than we could have otherwise, it's a win for everyone. You also see some of these things around like AI SDRs and, AI email agents. These are all agents that they're under our control as the marketer, but they're interacting with the customer on the other side. But the most fascinating category are these agents of customers, the ones that we don't control at all. I mean, the best example is like when your customer is using OpenAI, or Gemini or Claude to like do deep research on your category. You have no direct control over that, but that agent is shaping the way that customer journey goes. This is obviously one of the areas where there's been a lot of, I would say, excitement, but terror is probably an equally applicable word. Where it used to be like we just had search engine optimization for Google, had 20 years to kind of develop the art and science of that. Now we're talking about, I guess sometimes I call it AEO, sometimes I call it GEO, but this idea of like, okay, now we also have to figure out how do we as marketers have tools inside our MarTech stack that we're using to influence, not control, but influence those agents of customers that are out there. There's a lot of great activity happening there. I do want to just take this one moment, by the way, when we're like creating these agents that we control, but we're putting forth to engage with customers. We just want to take a little bit of care with this because, this whole ability for us to automate things that we used to have humans do. It's one thing when we're doing that behind the scenes backstage, but when we're doing it in things that are customer facing, we just need to take care that automation can't be just about greater efficiency for us as a company. It has to translate into better efficiency, a better experience for the customer. I'm sure you have seen examples where that hasn't been the case, and it's a terrible marketing experience for customers. So I just would say as, marketing champions of adopting these agents for customers, make sure you're keeping this 2x2 really close in mind. All right. So coming back to our long tail. All right. We thought this was crazy with like 15,000 commercial products out there in the world. Well, what is that thing from Jurassic Park? Hold on to your butts, because it's even more. AI is really accelerating the ability for companies to create more custom software, whether it's IT built software or, citizen, no code type software, or even AI agents doing software for you, building software for you, and you don't even know about it. I'll give you a quick example. I asked Claude, hey, get me a list of the most valuable companies in the world for the past 20 years, divide them up between tech and non-tech, and, show me in a graph, what that ratio, that relationship was. Takes about 30 seconds. That comes back. Here's your wonderful graph. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Behind the scenes, it wrote a whole bunch of JavaScript code. It built a little web app in React, to execute that and then deliver my thing. So here you are as a marketer. If you're making requests in just natural language, to ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, you may actually be creating a whole bunch of software programs and not even realizing it. That's pretty wild. This is the extreme end of the democratization of technology, that we started in a world where, MarTech really did start in many IT departments because people had to be experts of the technology to apply it, and then we started to get to these domain experts that, in marketing operations, that sort of blended tech and marketing capabilities. And then steadily we started to see more and more of these tools end up in the hands of marketers, and so the cost and the expertise to build things with this kept dropping. And sort of like a law of economics, as the cost goes down, the volume and the production rate, goes up. And then another way of looking at this is that's the who. The how was it used to be, you had to be like a coder, hard code languages like Java and C, and then low code, and then no code. And now these AI dynamic programs that are being created just from English language. And again, half the time you don't even know about it. And this has been actually one of the themes here in 2025 that's kind of blown people's mind. Andrej Karpathy, who was one of the folks originally behind OpenAI, is now out there at large. Back at the beginning of the year, he talked about this new kind of coding he called vibe coding. You give into the vibes and embrace exponentials and forget that the code even exists. All right, I gotta say, I'm not saying drugs were involved in this, but if they were, it wouldn't come as a surprise, right? This is some really bizarre mashup between 1960s counterculture and 2020s techno optimism. I feel like instead of the summer of love, we've been dealing with the summer of vibes. And if you allow me to just poke a little bit more fun at this whole vibe thing, vibe coding really, this is what we just used to call no code, low code. Right? It's the easy way. I don't have to be technical and I can actually build some useful apps and automations I need. People start talking about vibe marketing. That's kind of what we've also been calling growth hacking for the past, 10 years, or vibe selling, hustle culture. The funniest one, of course, is vibe finance, which I think is technically a crime in most states. We call it creative accounting, look up Enron on Wikipedia. Vibe anything. It was like shadow IT. Okay. All right. I'm going to stop with my jokes. The truth is, this vibe coding stuff is incredibly powerful. But for non-technical people, it's really only useful for certain capabilities. Jason Lemkin, who runs SaaStr, a non-technical person, over the summer, he did a bunch of building of apps with vibe coding tools. And he really he came up with this way of saying, okay, these are green light areas where it's safe to build these simple little web apps or prototypes or internal apps. When you start wanting to do more complex things or work with customer data, or if you're thinking of trying to rebuild Salesforce, in a vibe coded environment, we just advise you not to do that. It's not about building complex and advanced solutions. It's about being able to serve all of these more little specialized things that we always wanted, as marketers, to make our job easier, to deliver a particular experience to a customer, without having to file a ticket and wait 2 months for it to get built. It's powerful, but you need to understand it just works in certain scenarios where you're building something simple, or it's something for internal use, or maybe there's only going to be a few users that, use it just for their particular team, or it's a short lifespan, we're going to build this little thing and use it for a particular event. And then after the event, we're going to throw it away. that the sort of things we're going to be doing, it's going to be low risk activities. It's not going to be working with like, sensitive HIPAA data or things like that. Or even in these cases where just the idea itself is ambiguous. We kind of know we want something, but it'd be really hard for us to describe it, in a spec, to have someone go build. But by being able to play around with it dynamically ourselves, we can really learn, ooh, this is actually what I wanted. This is how I make it happen. And the thing that's so exciting about this is using these agentic coding environments, these vibe coding environments, is those use cases are the very ones that have been traditionally underserved. They've been the sort of things that we didn't build them as marketers, not because we didn't have the ideas, but because it wasn't the time and cost it would have taken, the time and cost and expertise, it couldn't justify it. And so now being empowered with these vibe coding capabilities to start to build out these things on the left hand of the spectrum, again, goes back to that earlier slide about, how slide creation, it's not just about volume, it's about unleashing new creativity. And to me, this is the heart of the AI agentic revolution for marketers, is we are moving more and more from things that were centralized services to more and more decentralized self-service, which has so many benefits. I mean, certainly there's the speed. You don't wait in a queue. You just immediately get what you want. Bandwidth changes, right? It's not having to like narrowly or sequentially go through some bottleneck of a team. It's wide and parallel. The whole organization starts to have access to this capability to create. And creation itself, right? I mean, when it got narrowly funneled through a small group of people, it sort of limited the creativity of what could be built. Versus like you empower more and more people to experiment, just the range of diverse ideas that can be explored grow exponentially. And of course, at the end of the day, we all know we're trying to learn. Everyone is oh my goodness, like there's just so much to learn, in this day and age. Well, we don't learn just by reading things or, listening to things. We learn by getting hands-on and doing things. And so again, by decentralizing more of this self-service capability, we are more widely distributing the ability for people across our teams to really learn how this all works. One of my heroes, Linus Pauling, who was a dual Nobel Prize winner. He won a Nobel Prize for chemistry and then later in his life, a Nobel Peace Prize. He was renowned for just being this constant font of like so many incredible like innovations. And a journalist once asked him like, how do you do this? How do you come up with so many great ideas? And it was like, hey, listen, the best way to have a good idea is to just have a lot of ideas, by expanding that funnel of things we're willing to experiment with. It's not like every single one of those is going to be a winner. A small percentage of them will actually be winners. But as the total net volume increases, the total absolute number of winners grows too. All right. In my last few minutes here, I want to close out by talking, let's just hit this one head on. In marketing, particularly as all these agents are, rising to the forefront, is AI going to eat my job? This was a photo, I guess, from the film shoot of Jaws. Anyways, Bruce the shark. Okay. My personal opinion of this is, if I grossly oversimplify, is marketing has had sort of three buckets of work. There's strategy and creative, which frankly was what everybody always would say like marketing is all about. And that's what we prized and we, put on a pedestal. But the truth is, as much as we valued it, as much as we felt that was the heart of marketing, the amount of time we actually spent on the strategy and creative was relatively small. Most of the calories, most of the time went into all the production and analysis work to deliver on that strategy and creative. And we appreciated that, but we didn't appreciate it as much as the strategy and creative itself. And then, of course, there's the MarTech and marketing operations capabilities behind this. Again, in the grand scheme of things, a relatively small investment relative to where, the mental energy for most of marketing went. And not super appreciated. I'm sure the marketing ops people in the audience will be like, yeah, I could have been more appreciated. I think the way this changes with AI is there's absolutely no doubt AI, agentic AI, these AI agents for marketers, for customers, they're dramatically reducing the amount of work we have to do in production and analysis. Now, you could say, oh, well, great. We had to have all these people doing this production and analysis. Now the AI can help us. We only need like 20% of that. Let's get rid of the other 80% of the people and we're done. There are some business leaders who are clearly thinking that way. I think it's incredibly short-sighted because this advantage of being able to use AI to dramatically change the efficiency curve of production and analysis, it's a commodity. Every single business on the planet is going to get that. You are not going to distinguish your business by this efficiency because every business is going to have this efficiency. The smart businesses are the ones who are basically going to take that gain of like, well, actually, at the end of the day, the production analysis work wasn't really where we felt the value was. And so now that we're recovering time and talent and resources, let's redirect this into more strategy creative, more experimentation, more, bolder ideas, the acceleration of getting more things, that we can try for more and more specific audiences that wouldn't have even been feasible before. And now we can start to bring it together. I like to call this the group of marketing makers, because even going back to that vibe coding, let your imagination run wild with things that you might have not even entertained a few years ago because there just wouldn't have been any way to execute it. If you look at AI as this opening up of possibilities to try bolder experiments, to try new things. I got a bunch of the experiments you'll try that won't work. That's fine. But as Linus Pauling would say, if to have a good idea, have a lot of ideas, invest in that. And then in parallel to that, it's the same thing on the MarTech and marketing operations to really make that engine of experimentation reliable. We need to invest in the infrastructure. We need to invest in the operational reliability and savvy to be able to really, truly support that strategy and creative 10x to where it was. So is AI going to take your job? Well, I think we're going to take a lot of production analysis. I think if you take this opportunity to lean into expanding the strategy and creative, you take this opportunity to lean into, really helping deliver more on the MarTech and marketing operations to support that, you are going to be in a great position for many, many years to come. And so, I guess with that, I believe we are almost ready for some live Q&A.
All right, let's get to the Q&A. So my first question for Scott, and Scott, thank you for the presentation. You had said earlier, we were chatting, and you had said earlier in your presentation, we don't need to agentify everything. And I said, I have an inbox that will disagree with you because that's where all the MarTech vendors send their news about their new AI and their agents, and they seem willing to agentify everything. You said when the inbox gets agentified, the whole world of email marketing is going to be disrupted. Can you talk about what that's going to look like and how marketers how can they respond to that?
Yeah, well, I think we're already seeing, a couple early examples. So certainly the big one right now is with, AEO, GEO, this shift of patterns from people using Google search and jumping to our website, to now people engaging in these answer engines and AI assistants where, they're actually probably doing more research than they ever were before, but our visibility and our control over that top of funnel, mid funnel process is just much weaker. The second example, sort of along this continuum, would be this new wave of AI agentic browsers. Things like Atlas from ChatGPT or Comet from Perplexity. If you haven't played with some of these, they're worth doing. But one of the things you can do is you go to a website, say like a website of your favorite MarTech vendor, maybe go to their pricing page, and instead of dealing with their particular way in which they frame the pricing, have your AI agent start to, okay, can you calculate this for me? Can you compare this up against competitors? Can you, okay, that's the list price on the web page. Can you tell me what's the average price people actually pay? And if you have this experience, by the way, and you've got a salesperson sitting next to you, their jaw is going to drop and be fine, because these agentic AIs are basically allowing people to hijack the web experience for the way the consumer consumer wants, not the way the marketer necessarily wanted. You can simply extend that to see that it's just a matter of time here until we have that sort of AI interface in the inbox for consumers who are like, actually, I don't even want to sort through all of these messages. AI, you take over the entire front line of managing these emails, and then you're surfacing ideas and concepts and things to me, perhaps in a very different format than any way the marketer had sent it to you, and then I will, with my AI agent, make choices about who I engage with when and how and what format. We're not there yet, but I'm going to bet we're going to be there in the not too distant future. And just like we saw search disrupted, just as we're starting to see web experience be disrupted, we're going to see email be disrupted too.
All right. Speaking of experimentation and AI agents, we've got a question from Connor. With all the experimentation that you've done with agentic AI, do you have any personal favorite projects?
Oh, well, so one of the things, I am very passionate about is, of course, ecosystems, in MarTech and, more broadly. And, it's been absolutely wonderful to set loose like deep research AI agents to go off, be able to like do comparisons across different ecosystems, different platforms, being able to then like pull those things into like spreadsheets automatically, have programs go off, be able to research, okay, what's the ratings and reviews of these folks? How do they compare in this environment? It's amazing. Like these things that, so many ideas that I'm sure have all crossed our minds at one point in time or another of like, oh, it'd be cool to have this, or wouldn't it be great to do this? And then you stop yourself and you're like, yeah, but that would take a whole bunch of work. I'd have to hire a bunch of people and, it's just not worth it. Boy, more and more of these things, you like put them into these, particularly deep thinking mode, deep research or like, extended thinking mode of these AI agents and let them go loose. The stuff they come back with, it's pretty impressive. Not perfect. That still, lots of caveats. But come on, it is friggin' mind-blowing how much it actually does, and it just keeps getting better.
Yeah. Remember the days when the internet was supposed to be like the big equalizer between the small business and the big business, and everybody was going to sell worldwide? David's got a question. If you're supporting a small to medium business, should your approach to agentic AI be the same as if you're supporting a large corporation?
We just finished a research project here for, we're going to do like a MarTech for 2026 report in December. And this is one of the things we were asking is like trying to understand the use cases that people were using with AI. And then we segmented it based on enterprises versus SMBs. And there were a couple of interesting findings there, but one of the things we were asking for was like, okay, what are you using these agents for? Are you like enhancing use cases with your existing MarTech products? Are you replacing existing functionality that was in this MarTech product and now you're going to use an AI to do it instead? Or are you using it for entirely new use cases that just weren't even possible before? And the thing that was fascinating is, okay, both enterprises and MBs are doing a lot of enhancing. They're not doing a tremendous amount of replacing. But the SMBs were twice as likely to actually be experimenting with brand new net use cases because, again, AI is opening up a set of possibilities, the way it works with unstructured data, the way in which it's able to, have this very generative, creative component to what it can do. But because it's new territory, enterprises it's a cliche, but it's true. They tend to be risk averse on this. There's a lot more you have to sort of go through to be able to even try something in an experimental pilot basis versus SMBs, they're willing to take a little more risk to try something. And so I think that's actually a huge opportunity right now, for SMBs. I mean, this is, again, it's a variation of the age-old story that, SMBs, their strength is their agility. Enterprises have a lot of resources. SMBs can have a lot of agility. This is a time where there's just so much change and disruption. I think for SMBs to really lean into that, that's your secret weapon.
Yeah. Robert's got a question. Is agentic for marketing about the evolution of current marketing platforms towards agents? I think we've seen a lot of the common platforms, the big platforms investing heavily in agentic? Or is it more about generic AI agent platforms, sort of like you started to describe earlier when you were talking about data accessibility?
That's a really interesting question. So it definitely is the case that almost all of the major, MarTech platforms have agentified and are continuing to accelerate more of it. I mean, to their credit, they all recognize this is one of these sort of, disruptive moments, that tech goes through. And a lot of them, have read the textbooks, have read the case studies, have understood how disruptive innovation, changes things in the past. And they're like, the hell, we're going to let that happen to us this time. So they're really leaning into it. And a lot of great stuff is coming out of there. And I think one of the advantages they have is they do come to it with a lot of context. And again, for most marketers who are like, also on this journey of just learning how this works and how this is going to change their business and their process and their customer engagements, bringing a lot of that context with the existing MarTech platforms, I think is a very easy way to help make that transition.
Yeah.
That being said, boy, these like AI agent platforms, I mean, we're joking a bit about the vibe coding stuff, but if you keep going down that spectrum, this ability for people to custom create very specific workflows, very specific customer experiences for, the particular thing they want to do for their business, that's only going to continue to grow. And I think, while I do always see there's value to a variety of platforms, core to, MarTech and its operations, I would not at all be surprised if more and more of the day-to-day functional work that we see happening is actually done through, more general AI platforms.
All right, we got 4 minutes to squeeze some more questions and answers in here. One I want to get to, it seems like every holiday season has a storyline, manufactured though it may be. People using AI and agents to help with their shopping. You showed a slide where it had the kind of personal shopper agents consumers can use. So when customers use their own AI agents to shop, how must we change our marketing strategy from the content we create to the way we measure success to make sure that our brand is chosen by the customer's agent, because the customer isn't doing the choosing anymore?
Yeah, I mean, I think at least at the moment for this holiday season, I think you're seeing consumers use these AI assistants for sure, but they're not autonomously going off and making buying decisions for us. Stick around for Christmas 2026. We'll see what happens then.
Right.
But here, I think a lot of this comes down to, if you aren't paying close attention to what's happening with this AEO, GEO set of capabilities, about how do we make sure that, at the very least, even the content, on our website or the content for our business, if it's an e-commerce one, is available in a format that's able for things like OpenAI and Anthropic and, Gemini to consume easily. I would also, keep a very close eye on a number of these AI engines are leaning into letting people be able to make transactions through their interfaces. Certainly, I was looking at the one from OpenAI. I mean, they have a program, you can be signing up to watch this as they open it up out of more beta customers. I think if I'm in e-commerce or anything that's transacting through the web, I want to be paying